Can woman be defined? That is the question. People are asking if what is the definition of woman, what is a woman, but nobody's asking if woman can actually be defined. In this video, I will prove that woman cannot be defined. It can only be described relatively. There's only a relative description of woman, not an absolute definition. So the confusing part for most people is, what does defined mean? What is the definition of definition? And here it is. A definition is a set of statements about a thing, woman, which are both universally valid, always true, and as a whole, unique to that thing. There is no set of statements about woman which are both universally valid and unique to woman. So let me say this again. A definition is a set of statements, right? You have statements about what the thing is. They must always be true. Always. There's no exception to a definition. And they must be, when you put all those statements together, they must be unique to that thing, unique to woman, where nobody else has those combinations of things. There is no set of statements about women which are universally valid, always true, and unique to woman. Therefore, woman cannot be defined. Woman is merely a relative description of a preponderance of common characteristics. I'll go over that at the end. This is how you can determine woman. Relative description, a generalization. But it cannot be defined. So let's talk about something what can be defined. Let's talk about our friend here, the square. Everybody knows what a square is since they were 3 years old. This is the definition of a square. It is, of course, it's a set of statements, 1, 2, 3, 4 statements, which are all universally valid. These are always true, no exceptions. And when you put all 4 of these together as a whole, they are unique to that thing, to the square. That's what a definition is. This is a real definition, no exceptions to this. So let's go over the definition. A square is a polygon, right? It's a closed shape with all straight edges, no open edges, no missing sides, no curved edges. It is a quadrilateral, which is a polygon with 4 sides. All squares have 4 sides, right? All sides must be of the same length. We all know that. A square must have 4 equal sides. And all angles must be 90 degrees. We all know that. They must be right angles. This is the definition of a square. This is what a definition is. No exceptions, no negotiations. That's what a definition. So we checked off all of these for a square. Polygon, yes, it's a polygon. Quadrilateral, 1, 2, 3, 4, right? That's correct. All sides must be the same length. All the same length. All angles must be 90 degrees. Yes, 90 degrees. This is the definition of a square. So let's try this with a rhombus. What is a rhombus? The definition. Is it a polygon? Yes, it's a closed shape with no curved edges. Is it a quadrilateral? Yes, it has 1, 2, 3, 4 sides. All sides must be of the same length. Yes, these are all the same length A. All angles must be 90 degrees. No. This has 120 degrees, wider angles than 60 degrees. 60 plus 60 is 120 plus 120 plus 120 is 360. Adds up to 360, but they're not the same. They are not right angles. So therefore, a rhombus cannot be a square. Let's check the definition of a rectangle. A rectangle is a polygon, of course. Quadrilateral, yes, 1, 2, 3, 4 sides. All sides must be of the same length. No, this is not a square. But it does match 4. All angles must be 90 degrees. That's true about a rectangle. So the rectangle has these 3, 1, 2, and 4. The rhombus has 1, 2, and 3, true. But square is the only one with 1, 2, 3, 4. This is what a definition is. Also, the most important thing about this right now is that these are not unique to square. None of these are unique to square. There are different kinds of polygons. There are different kinds of quadrilaterals. All sides must be equal. There's different kinds of those. I mean, none of these uniquely belong to square. They belong to other things too. But when you put all 4 of them together, that's a square. This is a definition. Now let's try to do the same thing with woman and man. This is the traditional definition of a woman. Now look at this. We see this all the time. Adult human female. This seems like a definition, correct? A definition is a set of statements, 3 statements. You got to be an adult, you got to be human, got to be female to be a woman, which are all universally valid. No, we have not defined what female is. That's the problem with this definition. If we have to define woman as a adult human female, forget these two. These can't even be defined either. Those are both relative things. And we haven't decided what female is. So let's try to define what female is and see why it can't work. If we're going to define female, then we're going to define male. A male would be an adult human male, right? They share adult and human. That's not unique to each other separately, but they both have it. It's a defining feature of both. And male would be the third statement. I'm rambling on, but follow me here. Female, this is basically the definition, right? Women have XX chromosomes. Female has a vagina, has ovaries, produces eggs, gets pregnant. They're smaller and weaker. Men have, male is XY chromosomes, has a penis, has testicles, sperm. These are all the list of descriptions of male and female. But the problem with this is, are these universal, these statements about a woman and a man, are they universally valid? Are they always true? No, they are not always true. Let's check them off. XX and XY chromosomes, not true. There are people with XXY, people with XXYY, people with XYY. There's a whole slew of combinations of these chromosomes. So this is not an absolute defining feature of male or female. Vagina and penis. We know people are born with both fused together. They don't have a vagina or a penis, really. They have both. They're hermaphrodites. Ovaries and testicles. Not everybody has ovaries and testicles. Produces ova. This is a big one. People say, well, women produce eggs so they can get pregnant. That's not always true. If you're defining woman as produces eggs, ova, and the women who cannot produce eggs cannot be women. It cannot happen. If you're defining any of these features as male or woman, you cannot do that because none of them are universally valid. Ovaries and testicles, not true. Ova and sperm, not everybody produces those. Gets pregnant and impregnates. That's not always true. There's some women who can't get pregnant. There's some men who can't produce sperm to get pregnant. And then these are, I'll explain these in a minute, smaller, weaker, bigger, and stronger. These are very clear proofs, pieces of evidence of why it cannot be defined. So, if woman cannot be defined, then how do we determine that somebody's a woman? First off, defining by a negative, you can't do that. Men do not have periods. I hear that all the time. Yeah, we know that. But that's not a definition of man. My coffee table can't have a period. That means it's not a man. And there are women who don't have periods. If this is the definition of a woman, of a man, then a woman who does not have periods must be a man by definition. That's why you can't define by the negative. Men do not give birth. Obviously, that's not true with all women either. So they would have to be men by definition if they can't give birth. See how that works? Let's go to the smoking gun. The smoking gun for this argument is intersex, and how it has to do with uniqueness and subjectivity, and how do we define unisex. If a person is born with XY chromosomes and a vagina, what are their sex and gender? Are they male or female? Are they a man or a woman? We say that this XX belongs to male, right? But vagina belongs to female. How is that possible if you can define male and female in absolute terms? So if you say that they are a man, then you're saying that a vagina is not unique to woman. If you're saying it's a man because it has XX chromosomes, it's a man, right? Then you're saying that a man can have a vagina, which means by definition, this must be unique to woman. So if you're trying to define somebody with XY chromosomes and a vagina, then vagina cannot be unique to woman. You're saying that a man can have a vagina. That's the basic explanation. None of these things work as a universal definition. Now, also, if they are a woman, then XY chromosomes, conversely, XY chromosomes are not unique to male. So if you XY and chromosomes in a vagina, and you define it as a male, then a man can have a vagina, not unique to women, and women can have XY chromosomes if you define it as a male. It's a logical absurdity. There is no set of statements about man or women which can be considered unique. Because if you're defining a man with XY chromosomes and a vagina, then vagina cannot be unique to female. That means men can have vaginas too. So that's a smoking gun of the argument. Men and women cannot be defined universally with universally true statements, and those statements are not unique to women if you try to define women. So the only solution is to say that man and woman cannot be defined. Now, the statement, everyone is either male or female, is false on its head. If you take the intersex category, then you cannot say that intersex people are one or the other. It's an impossible argument. I'll give you this argument and explain why it can't be true. If you're saying it's a man, XY chromosomes and vagina, then a man can have a vagina. These are four basic arguments that you can make about this. It's a man with a vagina. 2, it's a woman with XY chromosomes. 3, it's both man and woman. Or 4, neither man nor woman. These are 4 valid arguments that somebody can make within the context of the argument itself. So how do we say there's no objective way to reconcile this argument? If somebody says it's a man with a vagina and somebody else says it's a woman with XY chromosomes, there is no way to objectively prove who's correct and who's wrong. It's impossible. It's a logical impossibility. Therefore, the definition is both subjective and arbitrary. So if we cannot define man and woman, then how do we tell if somebody's a man or a woman? We see them every day. That's a man. That's a woman. It's obvious to us, right? If woman cannot be defined, then how can we tell if somebody's a woman? Pattern recognition. Common characteristics. We determine what a man or woman is based on a preponderance of common characteristics. That means they have more similarities than differences. Men have more similarities to us than they have differences with each other. This is all based on the fact that no 2 women or 2 men are exactly the same, and they're all different versions of the idea of woman. If all versions of woman are slightly different from one another, then there's no way to define what a woman is. It's a universal. There's no universal truth to woman. Oh gosh, this is tough. Women share more in common, not more similarities than differences. I don't know if I wrote that right. But basically, what I'm saying is women, this is why we can have black women and white women. We call them all women, of course, but there are differences between them. Black women have darker skin and different texture hair. It's very superficial, but it's true. That's how we see the difference. But black women and white women share much more in common with each other than they have differences. That's why we call them all women and people and humans. That's why we categorize all this stuff with a relative description. If every version of something is slightly different, then all you can do is compare them relatively to each other and make an assessment as a whole. This works with every single everyday object that you come into contact. Shoe, cat, dog, a tree, a house, a planet, a star. None of those are all categorized as being in the same category, but they're all slightly different from each other. Every single one. This table right here is not exactly the same as any other table on the planet Earth. Therefore, we have to do a relative comparison between all tables and pick out the average. That's how we determine what somebody is a man or a woman. So we also share some characteristics with other mammals, right? Cats and dogs, they're both mammals, right? But they have their own set of tropes or common characteristics. A preponderance of common characteristics is how we determine somebody is a woman, not by definition. There is nothing about woman or man which is universally valid and unique to them. All we do is assess based on how similar they are to each other.